Well, we have kicked it off. We have begun. HFC CareCon 2022 is now officially moving. Lauren, we were all here as panelists there in spirit. We couldn't hear everything, but we were there. We're certainly listening. For all of you entering the room right now, as you head on over to the main stage, this part of the main stage, we appreciate it. You can see you've got 5 other bright, shiny faces here that are going to kick us off for the Care for Caregivers panel. My name is Richard Louie of MSNBC, and I'm here to moderate this great conversation with an amazing, I think, points of view that we're going to bring to the idea of care for caregivers within the context that we all are very familiar with, and that has been said before, 16 million family caregivers, and we're just talking about Alzheimer's care in 2020, 16 million. And there's so much to be said around this, and it sounds like potentially, by the way, if you lose my video or anything, one of you just pick up, by the way, in case anything happens as I'm moving along. Raise your hand if you can't hear me, though. All right, great. That makes one person. Fantastic. Let me start with this and introduce our great panelists here, and I'll go in alphabetical order. Hey, Judy, how's it going?
Very good, thanks.
So that's Judy Cornish, an attorney, licensed in Idaho, and a member of the National Academy of Elder Law Attorneys. Nayla, if I've got that somewhat close. Great to see you, Judy. Fantastic. Next up, we've got Sandra Edmonds Crewe, Dean and Professor of Social Work and former Director of the Howard University Multidisciplinary Gerontology Center. Good to see you, Sandra.
Hello, how are you? Great to be seen, and it's a pleasure to be here.
And thank you for doing what you're doing. My dad was a social worker as well, and it's good stuff you're doing over there. Ben Feldman, actor, who recently wrapped his 6th season of the critically acclaimed NBC workplace comedy Superstore. We're in the same building, if you will. Ben, good to see you.
Good to see you too. Glad to be here.
Yeah, awesome. And Caitlin Reilly. Hey, Caitlin.
Hi.
Yeah, actor, comedian, garnered huge following on TikTok and Instagram with her characters and parodies. And Susan, you're used to this because this is what happens when we go alphabetical. Susan Schneider Williams, great to see you. Can you hear us?
Okay, you know what? I've been just watching with no sound. I just turned. I can hear you good. Everything's good.
Oh, you can hear. Okay, great. So you were watching Lips earlier, is what you're saying?
I was just watching The View, and
Did you unmute it right at your intro?
Was I just introed?
No. Yeah, you literally the intro.
Sounds like perfect.
I'm just saying, that's
Really cool.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you for noticing, Ben.
Well, let me finish that though, Susan, activist and wife of the late Robin Williams. Susan, thanks for being here. So for all of our panels here, free and easy, please interrupt. I'm a cable news anchor. I'm used to y'all just, going any way you want. So have at it, and let's just get to the important things, and that's some of the ideas and the lessons around caring for caregivers and being a caregiver. And I want to just throw this out, and I'll start with you, Ben. How do you explain that you're a caregiver, and why is that important?
I mean, a caregiver means 80 million different things, and it took a long time to even think of myself as one, because I always sort of felt like this was happening to me or near me. But it's unavoidable, at least in my situation. I'm an only child. My parents are divorced, so my mother's kind of on her own. She wasn't with anybody when she was diagnosed, and so I was all she had. And she lived in Europe, and so I guess I was pretending like I wasn't really much of a caregiver, but I flew her to Los Angeles, got her an apartment, and inevitably moved her into a home. So that's what being a caregiver is to me, I guess. And complaining to my wife.
Yeah, Caitlin, as you've gone through that journey, that one of the toughest parts for me was, how do I tell people this is what I'm doing? right? I can't make it tonight. I can't go to work today. What are you doing? And you've been doing it for how long? Yeah, 7 years. What is it like? I mean, how did you explain it to folks?
Well, me personally, I was sort of in this strange predicament. I mean, I generally had older parents, and my dad was diagnosed in 2012. I was 22. And for the next handful of years, I had to leave work early sometimes because he would take off. There were many things I couldn't do or go to because I had to be with him. He couldn't be alone. So a lot of my friends had younger parents and I was dealing with things that everyone will eventually be dealing with, taking care of their parents, but at a much younger age. And a girl about town. But I sort of didn't have that 20s experience because I, along with my mother, was taking care of my dad. So that's just that. That's how I explained it,
Yeah.
It's a very isolating experience.
Yeah, it is. Yet there's, as we're just talking about the Alzheimer's dementia space, right? 16 million. Isolating, yet we have so much company. And Susan, I guess, one of the tough things along the way is, finding others. But when it feels like it's coming at you a million miles an hour, and for you, Susan, it did, a million miles an hour. And how did you self-identify? What did you do immediately when you were starting to tell people, this is what's happening right now. This is what we're doing together?
Boy, so it's so interesting, hearing Ben and Caitlin talk about from their perspective and just this idea of, I didn't know I was a caregiver.
Yeah, right.
Like, we didn't know what the problem was. And with Lewy body dementia, there's about 1.5 million people in the US who are affected by that. And then extrapolate all the actual caregivers, right? It's a lot of people. And all we would do, is we muddled our way through the relentless doctor visits, through the endless insomnia, where there was no more day and night. It was just, that was
that line.
And so I really didn't know I was a caregiver. And I found that out afterwards. It's like, oh, that's what I was doing. That's what was going on here. And,
right.
And there was one point, I think, Caitlin, something you just said sparked this, is we were supposed to go out to dinner one night with some really dear friends to celebrate this friend's birthday. And this was a night when Robin, we were getting ready to go. And then next thing I know, he's laying down, and I could just see that, he was riddled with pain. It's hard to describe. It's not like they have a giant gouge on their arm and they're in pain.
Yeah.
It's like the house inside of them is on fire and they need to get out, and they're not even sure. They may not have the words how to describe it to you, And and so how did I answer that phone call? I mean, Robin and I, we were very honest with each other. That integrity was a huge part of our relationship. We were very honest with our friends. So suddenly being put in a position to lie to our very dear friend that Robin's come down with the cold, he's just really not feeling good. We can't make it at the last minute. But that's horrible. But that's what we had to do.
So you didn't know you were a caregiver. I got to tell you, I went through the same thing. The first couple years, I didn't have a label for it. And I had to run towards saying, I got to say this more openly and more often, because I got to hear myself saying it so that I understand the role I'm taking on. But I got to tell you, like you said, Susan, and I know Ben and Caitlin too, you probably went through this. All right, now I got to say it out loud. I got to say it out loud. And I got to say, I'm not being paid. I got to say, I don't know what the heck I'm doing, that I have no training and I'm just trying to figure it out. But with a lot of love. Judy, love counts a lot. And when we think about caregiving, sometimes it doesn't feel like that's enough when we're trying to take care of ourselves.
Yeah. and you introduced me as an attorney. Actually, when I got involved with dementia care, that was 2010. And I left a roundabout way, left Portland, Oregon to leave a law practice and be semi-retired, practicing elder law. And so I became a caregiver by choice. And for me, it wasn't a family member or a loved one, it was a neighbor. And, but I really think when we enter something we don't know anything about, because, hey, I'm a lawyer, I know nothing about medicine. And at the time, all I knew about dementia was it makes people crazy and you got to lock them up for their own safety. And you might have to use drugs. That was the sum total of everything I knew. But that love, I think we have traditionally in this country, we've been approaching dementia care from the perspective of fear of the unknown, fear of, because we've been told it's the worst thing that can possibly happen and you can't live with it. Oh my goodness, we better cure it. We've got to find a cure. So that's fear. But if you do approach it from love, it's a totally different problem. And I think that's where, that's what I had the opportunity to not be, watching somebody come apart. And Susan, I love what you said. The house inside is on fire and they've got to get out. And so how do we help? What's going on? Nobody can see it, but if you love somebody and you spend time with them, you see it. The house is on fire. So that, to me, that's it. It's like, okay, how do I help that person? Yeah. People experiencing it, because boy, it's going to be most of us, 50% of Americans by the time we're 80.
Yep.
We're looking at, it's us. Yep. This isn't them. This is us. Yeah.
You see, you brought it, Judy. Now I can see myself. Actually, the camera's on now, so I just not sure. I didn't know. I could see myself on my side, but hey, Sandra, putting on your academic hat and your practice hat and your experience here, briefly talk about this idea that we just brought up in that journey that we're in the role, but we're not self-identifying, and how much that may not give us the best ability to do the best we can for ourselves as well as for the person that we're caring for.
Okay. Thank you so much. And I really have appreciated the comments from my colleagues here. I think not identifying may be a cultural thing as well, as I think about it, because as a caregiver, I immediately identified because it was the experience with my grandmother as well. So when we think about the African-American community, which is very diverse, but many of us, it's our second, third time around with this. So when you think about fear, there's also fear in knowing what's coming down the pipeline. Mm-hmm. And so I think we have to think about it in terms of whether the individual this is their first experience with it, or whether this is a continuation, a generational experience. But I think, as we focus on caregiving, we have to really, it's an experience. And I say this often, I experienced my mother's dementia. The family experienced dementia. And when I worked as a social worker, that is what I have seen. It is the whole unit is impacted one way or the other. Not always negatively, by the way, because the assumption is that it's a negative experience, but sometimes it's an experience that brings families together. So as a professional social worker, I really kind of talk about starting where the client is, starting where the individual is, and having to sometimes rethink. Mom is still there, but she may not be in the same way that I knew her before. So then I get to live for both of us. And so if we are able to sort of use that as a gauge, then we're not just looking at what happened to me, it's what happens to us.
Yeah. We got a lot of ground to cover, so I can't wait to get to these other questions. Hey, what's your piece of advice for caregivers at any point in their journey? What's your piece of advice? Who wants to go for it?
I'll go. Because I probably have the least helpful advice. It'll be a crescendo starting with me. I'm lucky. I come from funny people. My parents are funny. I'm sure something tells me Caitlin does too, and Susan, you may relate. But I found humor to be a really important thing. There's two. My mom was able to accept what was going on relatively fast. Just, I guess, anecdotally, when I hear other people tell their stories, there's a lot of pushback originally from the diagnosee. Is that a word? Anyway. Sure.
It is now. Yeah.
Right. But she sort of accepted it right away, and she used humor the way she always did her whole life to kind of take control of the situation. Because, in my opinion, sadness and devastation is something that only happens to you if you don't happen to it. And I feel like humor is a way of happening to it, of taking ownership and taking control of something, and saying, you can't ruin my life or ruin my mood or ruin whatever because I'm laughing at you. And that was one element that I think, we were constantly joking. My mom in the early stages, I'd call her and I'd be like, "Hey, Mom," and she'd ask who I was and then just laugh at me. Like, knew who I was at the time. But I think another important thing about humor is that, sadness and anxiety and frustration and all of these negative feelings are almost always about something that's either already happened to you or something you think is going to happen. And one of the very few things that's insanely, tremendously present is humor, is laughter. Like being surprised or like physical pain or, sex stuff. And so it's one of the ways, especially when you're when you have someone going through this in your life and you're going through it too, you could spend a million hours being sad about what's happened or what's coming, or you could just take advantage of the last kind of moments that you have in the present. And I found humor to be the absolute easiest and best way to get there.
So true. Everybody's like nodding. Yep. Joy despite difficulty, right? Laughter despite difficulty. Go, 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 go. Anybody else got one?
Well, Ben, I want to say you don't have to be a comedian to appreciate humor, because my mother had her comedy show every day as we were working with her. So I just wanted to add to that. But one of my pieces of advice is find a way to let others help you. And very often we will say, "I got this." And even if you don't have it, you'll say, "I've got this." But if you find a way to let others to help, and it doesn't have to be in huge ways. For example, my sister lived in Boston and I was in Washington, D.C., and she wanted to help. And you're saying, well, this is sort of a in-person, in front of you kind of a process. But I started having her buy socks. Hey, what you can do for Mom is you can send her some socks, because something about those socks get lost in assisted living. So she started sending socks. And I had enough socks for the whole assisted living program. But again, give others something they can do, rather than to get into, I'm the only child who's doing this. I found something that they could do and allowed them to do that.
That's great. That's a lot of socks.
Yes, a lot of socks.
A lot. One for every foot. Anybody else? Susan, Judy, Caitlin?
Oh, Caitlin, you ready? You want to go?
Yeah. I was going to say, this is so incredibly vague, but I was just going to say patience. Because for me, I was wrestling with a lot of resentment. I was a lot younger, and I was like, I was younger and the youngest in the family. And because I was still living at home with my parents, I felt that the brunt of the caregivership was on me.
Yeah.
So for years, I was walking around with a lot of resentment. Like, no, I don't have to deal with this. No one my age is dealing with this. This isn't fair. I should be able to go and do whatever I want. I didn't go to college far away from home because I had to stay home with my dad, things like that. But I would get very frustrated and I would lose my patience and I would be short. And I realized that they are just as frustrated as you are. And that's something that I learned with my dad is, you know, he was an actor. He was a wordsmith. He was incredibly intelligent, charming, funny. One of his favorite sayings was, God, if I had a brain, I'd be dangerous. Like he was just like an old, you know, old-timey joke kind of a guy. But
Yeah.
I would find him searching for words. I would find him around the house getting so confused. Why am I here? What was I looking for? What am, you know, he would struggle so hard to communicate. And I didn't want him to feel like I was frustrated. So that's when I tapped into taking my time with him. And over time, I found a way to have this weird communication with him. He never forgot who I was. He forgot who everyone else was, but except me. That's not correct English. I just found that when I took my time and I had the utmost patience, I was able to fully understand him, fully guide him, keep my own peace of mind, not be so frustrated and tense and, you know, sad all the time. Everything had to slow down. And once I realized that, I had a better emotional life through it all.
Yeah, and you're really bringing home something people don't often see, Caitlin, right? And that is the number of young caregivers out there, and in the 20s and 30s and teens. And we're talking about a significant number. I mean, it could be 30%, it could be a third. We often will equate caregiving with people that look like me at my age, but it's not. It's like all across the spectrum. All right, Susan, you got one?
Okay, Richard, you look young, so let's just, you know.
I know, I was going to say Richard.
I'm like, what are you talking about?
It's a filter.
Okay. So one thing I want to bring back, when we were all talking on a prep call last week, whenever that was, Caitlin, you'd mentioned something regarding your dad about, I think you were the one who said it, he couldn't find words anymore.
Yeah, and it really frustrated him, and he would be embarrassed by it.
Yeah. So, you know, here's Robin, who, when he was doing Bengal Tiger at the Baghdad Zoo on Broadway, like just within a year before everything started falling apart, you know, he did hundreds of shows. He didn't miss one word, not one. And I knew, I was backstage going over it. I go at, like, he didn't miss one. And you know, the actor who's standing by, who will come in if the main actor needs a break, never happened. You know, that was Robin, right? And then it got down to, he was so pained by losing his descriptor words. You know, we'd be sitting at the kitchen table and he would just, it came down to, he would just tell me, where he used to use all these words in describing me to me, and just, you know, as we're talking, he would just say, "You're amazing." And I'd say, "Well, thank you." You know, like, and he felt so bad that was the only word he could find anymore. And so looping back to like what Judy was saying, like, and I think where we're going with this is that as a caregiver, whether you know it or not, you become a coach, you become a consultant, you're on the same team. And I think particularly because we didn't know what we had, we were in the process with this giant team trying to find out what's going on. Doctors, clinicians, hypnotherapists, I mean, you name it, psychiatrists. So we're on this hunt. And so I felt like me and my partner, you know, we're tracking down a monster. We're tracking down something. It seemed like a monster, you know? And so there was a point where when Robin's calendar was cleared for him for the first time ever since he started stand-up, you know, imagine, right? All of a sudden your calendar is cleared. And what does that feel like? And so he was having difficulty accessing his own places to go inside, even whether it was watching television, you know, whereas he used to watch a lot of late night and other actors and everything to stay up on the craft, to stay up on things, all that interest was waning. And so he was losing his ability to access his own creativity is what was happening. Mm-hmm. And so, whereas I, at the same time, had pretty stiff pressures with an art show where I produced like 40 paintings and I had a lot going on with that. And I'd say, so what I did is I found out I'm going to bring him into my creativity. And I started to give him assignments, and it really helped. It's like, and I said, I need help. I mean, first of all, I went to go do a photo shoot, or go shoot some morning sunrise over a field of lavender at like 5:30 a.m. And he came with me and was right behind me as I'm shooting my camera, capturing for something to paint, right? I'm doing what I do. And so having him come into my creative process helped him. And he started to name some paintings, and I just brought him with me, and I really, I'm a mom of 2 boys who are in their early 20s now. And it reminded me very much of being a parent. And, okay, so that's kind of the pre, and then what I want to give is some real specifics of after Robin passed, when I learned about the science of this, and that I actually had been a caregiver for about a year, and what this, what I would suggest now. And this is something when I do speak, it's something I've kind of boiled down to a few suggestions. And that is, one, as a caregiver, you want to work with a team. It's important to get specialty care. And a lot of you caregivers out there, you may already know this, you already have this going on, but to get specialty care is key. And to work with the team. And what I want to say is, while we had a team of a lot of people, they didn't know they were a team. There was no communication, and that would have been huge. So getting specialty care means finding a specialist, your lead doctor, who is aware, who knows about Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and Lewy body. These 3 are very closely connected. So a specialist is going to understand the nuances. Robin actually had, while Lewy body was prevalent nearly throughout every region of his brain and brainstem, he did have Alzheimer's, tau tangles in there, and amyloid plaque. So he had, Alzheimer's going on as well. So anyways, key to get a specialist, and then also having a movement disorder specialist involved, because those are the people who know about the medications. And that's really important. Lewy body disease patients should not receive an antipsychotic. It can speed up the disease progression. And then when it's taken away, it doesn't retract. And Robin was given one of those at one point. And so anyway, a motor specialist would know the nuances of that. And
right.
And then I'll wrap with one last thing, and that is consider participating in research trials. And that doesn't mean just the person who is affected by the illness. It's also, scientists need the other, they need all the rats. They need all of us. So
that's right.
So.
And some are more funny than others, right? Hey, Judy, we're down to like 8 minutes, and I want to make sure I've got like a list of 8 more questions. But I wanted, Judy, I don't want to lose some of and I know that we have 2 big brains. Well, we've got 5 big brains. We got folks that have been looking into a lot of stuff on the research side and thinking of ways to help caregivers. Talk about the Dawn method, Judy, if you can, briefly.
Listening to you, Caitlin, talk about patience. I have no patience at all. But every time somebody hears I work with dementia, they always say, "Oh, you must be so patient." Well, I'm not. So to me, the flip side of that coin for the rest of us who don't naturally have that patience gene is our expectations. So this is where I've come at how to spend time with people when they're experiencing dementia, how to love somebody and how to maintain the companionship, how to maintain communication and the connection, how to be a teammate with them. And to me, it's expectations. I need to make sure that I understand in plain English what it means when somebody loses their memory skills. That means don't try to jog my memory because it's not going to work. Or when somebody's losing executive functions, what's that really mean? And if you break it down, we're talking about somebody who's going to lose the ability to see cause and effect, sequencing, the ability to prioritize. And so these are really specific skills. And if you expect your companion to do things they cannot do or to understand things they can't understand, you will constantly embarrass them, constantly frustrate them, and ruin your time together. And like Ben said, all good things reside in the present. That's where you will find companionship. That's where you will find beauty. That's where you will find comedy. Everything is there. It's all in the present. It's not in the past. It's not in the future. And those of us who do begin experiencing dementia will end up living in the 3-second now, in the present. And that's where to join us. So that was as brief as I can make it, Richard.
All right, I appreciate it. I appreciate it. Hey, Sandra, we're going to try to get all of our answers now down in about 30 seconds. If everybody can do that, please, and we'll get through a lot. Sandra, what's important to remember about mental health when we are caregiving?
What's important is that you can't give care if you're not feeling the love. So that means that you have to make sure that you are mentally healthy in order to provide the context that the other person needs. So, you hear that airplane story all the time. You must feel good about self before you can help others.
Caitlin?
Oh God, I don't know. I think, my journey was so complicated and difficult, but I will say, after my father passed, I had a lot of emotional trouble. I was guilty. I was angry. I was so many things. But I think forgiveness helps a lot. Forgiving yourself, forgiving the person you're caring for, forgiving the situation. It's a ridiculously unforgiving disease. Nothing about it is fair. And I dealt with a lot of anger. And I was always very, very angry, not at my dad, but just at the situation. I felt very sorry for myself. So if you just sort of lead your mind with forgiveness, I feel like that will help a lot.
Yeah. And my father just passed of Alzheimer's in December. And I'm like, well, am I okay? Is it okay for me not to be okay? Is it okay for me not to be okay and tell other people I'm not okay or I am okay? And I don't know the answers to any of this. But I think when we talk about mental health, what I have realized is it's not 1 or a 0. It's not a 1 or a 0. Ben, what do you think?
Yeah, you guys took all the good answers. But yeah, forgiveness, to pivot, to piggyback on that, email corporate speak, sorry. But to understand kind of what they're going through, I found myself, I got very selfish in the beginning. I would resent my mother for not knowing things or forgetting things or messing up. And I would have to constantly stop and be like, this has happened to her. She can't help this. You can't get mad at her the way you would have gotten mad at her 10 years ago for messing something up. And so I think constantly sort of checking in and understanding what they're going through. And the one thing I wish I could go back and tell me was every moment I spent early on thinking, oh man, I miss the good old days when my mom was my mom. And then every moment after that, I would realize that moment before was still one of the good old days until the good old days were gone. And so I missed a lot of moments thinking that the moments had already passed.
Hey, Susan, I want to, it's such great stuff. Thank you all for being open and vulnerable, by the way. This is so key to our respective journeys. And we've got a lot of talented, funny people here. So I do want to move to how do you help yourself laugh? Let's give other caregivers tips here very quickly in your 30 seconds. Susan, how do you get other? What's your tip to laugh?
Really, what's that term about when you have like dark humor, gallows humor? Like I think there's like a dementia humor, and it becomes easy to have that a bit when you realize we are all in the same boat, whether you are exhibiting symptoms right now or not. From the minute you're born, your brain is going to start to, this is just a part of life. And it could be a number of reasons. And so I think the humor actually comes from out of the love and for others and for ourselves, and not expecting such perfection out of these bodies
Yeah.
and these brains, you know?
Yeah, so true. Judy, 30 seconds. Laughter.
You know, no matter how you look at it, it's in the present. So if you need respite, you need a break, turn to your loved one. Eye contact is critical if your companion is losing memory skills. Eye contact, and just communicate love, and everything is funny. Everything can be looked at as funny, but it's, you know, the only way. How many of us have access to a huge medical team? Very few. How many of us have access to even a single caregiver to give us respite? Very few. How many of us could afford to hire, even if we could find great caregivers or a really great care facility? You know, very few of us. So what do we get? We have the moment. That's where, if you are exhausted, just let it all go, turn to your loved one and look at them with eyes of love and laugh about whatever is in your present. You know, we never lose our ability to use our senses, you know, to whatever degree. What you can see, hear, smell, taste, touch, find it and find something to enjoy, you know. And beauty is just, laughter is beauty, just like anything else. So.
And it comes in a lot of shapes. We were in my family starting to laugh about poop. That's where it went. So there you go. Hey, all right, Sandra, 30 seconds. Laughter, 30 seconds.
Well, don't sweat the small stuff. You know, it's not so important that your clothing match. What's important is that I'm there to see that your clothing don't match. And so, you know, I would have a mixed match clothing day. Okay, we're wearing stripes and flowers, and have a good laugh about it in terms of doing that. So if you don't sweat the small stuff, then you don't become overly focused on the negative.
All right, Caitlin and Ben, you're our professional laughers, or people that make us laugh.
Yeah, I think for me, and even sort of after my father passed, is surrendering to the situation. Something that helped me, and I know this sounds really terrible out loud, but like, life sucks. Life sucks and is unforgiving, and it's a part of the human experience. So get on the train, have a laugh, crack a joke. You know, we're all gonna live. We're all gonna, you know, it's this is hard to explain, but yeah, it was sort of freeing to me. Life sucks. Laugh, enjoy it.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah.
Yeah.
Our room's about to close. Yeah, go, Ben.
Piggybacking on what Caitlin said, give yourself permission is the only thing I would say. You know, when I realized that I was a caregiver, I thought I was joining this extremely serious club of really serious, somber people. And it doesn't have to be. This is a stupid, ugly disease that's ridiculous and makes people do ridiculous things, makes people act, both caregivers and people with it, do stupid, ridiculous things. And you've got to give yourself permission to laugh at it. And that's how you take control of it, I think, at least emotionally.
We've run out of time.
No.
But I want one word from everybody that you can send off to all of these great attendees in our room. Just one word that describes caregiving, any type that you'd like. And we want to thank all the attendees for joining our room, by the way. We saw your questions come in. We just ran out of time. I was trying to get there, but one word each about caregiving. Sandra, I start with you.
Love.
Caitlin.
Patience.
Susan.
Presence.
Susan.
I'm stalling for you, Ben. Judy.
Expectations.
Ben.
I'm gonna toe the company line here for HFC and say laughter.
Love it. Okay. Care for Caregivers. Thank you all for being here. Enjoy the rest of CareCon 2022. See you a little bit later.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Thank you guys so much.
Bye-bye.
See you later. Good to hang out.
Sorry for your father.